Thank you, Tony, and good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everyone, depending on where you are following us from today. I won't do just a very quick intro. Frédéric Léger, our Senior Vice President for Commercial Products and Services, will take you through what basically has happened with training during the pandemic and where training is headed in actually reskilling the workforce of the future for aviation. So with that, Frédéric, over to you.
Thank you, Marcus, and then good day to everyone. If we can just jump into the topic immediately on the next slide. So just to maybe set the scene, everybody knows that our industry is very technical and is highly regulated, and of course that means that our staff requires a high degree of training, especially to ensure the standard of safety which is expected. Safety remains obviously our number one priority. During the COVID pandemic, the industry has laid off quite a number of staff, and some of them are now returning to work after a long period of absence. And the focus on safety has remained clearly unchanged. And so we need to train the returning staff, but also we'll see in the study that we have conducted that we also need to train the new hires on the safety aspect as the recovery sets in. So clearly we are talking about right skilling. Right skilling means upskilling, but it means also reskilling the people, and it means also cross skilling the staff. So clearly it will be key for the restart. That slides show briefly that IATA has been training a lot of staff in the industry for the last 50 years. We are offering many courses, more than 350, 40 diplomas. We have a lot of qualified instructors, more than 300, who are training staff in 20 training centers. And we are also partnering with a lot of schools all over the globe to help us disseminate the standard and the training. So approx IATA is training 100,000 professionals annually. Of course, this was pre-COVID, with the clear mission to ensure that we are right skilling the aviation professional around the globe. So to continue our mission, it was critical for us to understand if the training needs have changed during the COVID crisis, but also to understand what will be the future training needs. And that's the reason why we have conducted a survey with more than 184 human resources decision makers. And clearly the main outcome of the survey are the following ones. Severe budget cuts for the training in the aviations, but also they have explained to us what are the key learning strategies that they want to put in place during the crisis and post-crisis. What are the main areas we should focus on regarding training, and of course, what are the preferred learning formats for the future of the training. So if we dig into the details of the analysis and the key survey findings, it's clear that 70% of the respondents have mentioned that they have lost their budget, their training budget, either entirely or more than 50% of their budget have been cut. The second aspect is that training is in limbo, meaning that 11% of them are telling us that they are not going to provide any skill development, at least during the crisis, and that 36% have embraced the self-study solutions. When we look at the main area where the focus on training should be, clearly again it's safety, but also on the operation side, on the security side, and on the economic side. On the format itself, 85% have told us that online learning be it e-learning or virtual classes, so what we call interactive, are now key for the skills development. If we move to the next slide, some more key takeaways and interesting perspective is that the HR leaders clearly wants to use the existing staff during the crisis to perform functions needed for the restart. There is a clear need to understand the competencies that are needed for the restart. So for that, they are looking at the different curriculum of their staff, and they are also looking at what are the training needs that are required during the crisis and beyond the crisis. And then they are looking at agile training plans, really to train the existing staff on multiple functions. So they want to capitalize on the staff and ask them to perform different functions on top of their usual functions, so that they can maximize the use of the staff on different functions. So how do they want to do that? If you look at the right side of the, we keep the same slide, but on the right side of the slide, clearly it's through collaboration. And what do they mean by collaboration is it means that they want to use internal staff to train other staff. And this could be senior employees training the more junior staff, but it can be also cross-training, meaning that peers can train other of their colleagues on different functions so that they expand their skill and can be used on different matters. Also, what is very important is that they all recognize that training is critical for the recovery. People have been absent for quite some time, so they will need refresher training. They also look at competency-based training, as we said, focusing on tasks and on functions, very dedicated training, very focused training. And also the fact that we have new hires are going to come with the restart in the industry, and we'll have to train those people. So that's the way the budget is going to be reallocated in order to really maximize the efficiency of the training. If we move to the next slide. Here we are looking at, and we ask the question, what are the key disciplines and skills that the HR leaders or the staff would like to be trained on? And it's clear that they focus on the disciplines which are critical for the current situation, but also for the restart. So again, safety skills. We have new safety measures that are in place. Social distancing and all the sanitary aspect that we need to meet. There's also operational skills to ensure efficiency. Of course, there's less staff. There's still some operations to be conducted, so they are looking at the efficiency. And there's also some soft skills that are looked at. Adaptability and resilience are the two soft skills that come the most often. When we look at the training methods in the COVID time, but also post-COVID world, it's clear that the trends which started before COVID has accelerated, and it's the move from the face-to-face training and classroom training to an online mode of training, starting with e-learning, when people can do their training whenever they want in their time. Using computers, phones, tablets to do their training, as well as virtual classroom, especially for some of the more regulated training who there is a need to have an interaction with the trainer. In that case, we have the virtual classroom where the trainer is online, real time, and training the different people, where people can interact and ask different questions. And then there's the more usual ways of sharing information, like the webinars, and 20% also mentioned the introduction of VR training, especially for the ground operations, for those training where you need a bit more practical activities, then VR is seen as also a potential way to really train efficiently the staff. So if we look at what IATA has been doing during the crisis and what we are going to do beyond the crisis, and I'm just going to take a few examples. Clearly, there is quite a number of cabin crew staff that has been laid off. And as part of that difficult time, we have worked with the cabin crew to understand a potential training that we have developed for them to clearly identify their strengths and their knowledge so that they can capitalize on those and use that for other industries. And we have clearly helped them to transition from the air transport industry to other industry where they can apply the skills that they have learned and worked on for so many years. And I think we have more than 3,000 cabin crew staff that have been through that e-learning. A second aspect, which I think has been critical during the crisis, is the fact that we have some time and temperature sensitive standards that have been developed by the cargo team in IATA and used by the industry. But we have emphasized the focus on the transportation of vaccine, and we have developed online training, be it e-learning, but also virtual classes focusing on the transportation of vaccine. Now, if we look at the restart aspect, clearly there's coming with the restarts, new hires that are coming from different industries. Sometimes the culture on safety is a little bit less prominent than in our industry, as it is critical. We mentioned it at the beginning of the presentation. So we have developed a safety awareness program for new hires, again, online for them to quickly embrace the safety aspect of the industry. And we have also developed an aeronautical skills working group, meaning that we are bringing people from the industry to look at the different training requirements for them to guide us in the next and future training that should be developed for the industry. All of that is described into a report. This studies clearly, and all the topics that we have just explained right now are described in a document, the workforce skills and training to fuel the revitalization of the aviation industry. And this is accessible on the IATA.org/training website and all the usual social media that you can use to access the information. That's it for me, Marcus. Thanks.
Thank you, Frédéric. On the question side, as usual, please place those into the chat and we will respond to you. Frédéric, just maybe can you highlight, out of all the things we did for training during the pandemic, what was sort of the most important aspect of training to get the industry through? So what kind of training would you say was it the vaccine transportation or DGR courses that we kept alive through virtual training to keep shipments going? Maybe you can just spend a few minutes on that.
Yeah, I think the fact that we have converted most of our training from the more traditional face-to-face training to a virtual environment, be it the e-learning or the virtual classes, has been critical to make sure that our staff keep their training record aligned with the regulatory requirements. As you know, in the industry, there's a lot of regulatory requirements which are critical for our staff to perform activities and to make sure that they kept their training record in place without having to travel in different places of the world. We have been able to make available those training in a very short time frame. Online, you described the DGR training, and it's true that we have also done a lot of advocacy work with the regulators to explain to them that a good virtual training with interaction with the trainer, real-time interaction with the trainer could be as efficient as a face-to-face training. And they have accepted that, and they are recognizing the virtual classes training for dangerous goods.
Okay, with that, I have a question on the cabin crew training we did. Was it just the actual course, or did we also look at aspects like health and mental well-being during the crisis?
No, it was primarily focusing on the identification of the skills, knowledge, expertise that cabin crew have developed as part of their job, and to help them identify the use of those skills in other parts of different industries. And that was really the focus, to give them the confidence that they have acquired a lot of knowledge and expertise that are transferable to other industries.
Okay, I think with that, I think we can close this session because I gather we're running a bit behind time anyhow. So, Frédéric, thank you very much for your presentation this morning. And with that, I'll hand over to my colleague, Perry Flint, who I believe is moderating the session on Turbulence Aware. So over to you, Perry.
Thank you, Marcus. Yes, indeed. And as Marcus mentioned, we are running just a few minutes behind, so we'll move forward. With us today, very happy to have him, is Captain Brent King. He's Head Flight Operations Efficiency, and he's going to provide an update on IATA's Turbulence Aware initiative. Brent, over to you.
Thank you, Perry. Pleasure to be here today, and thank you everyone for joining this presentation. We haven't had a chance to update you since December of 2018. A lot has happened in that time. We ran an operational trial of Turbulence Aware during 2019, and then in 2020 we launched the full operational solution to industry. Just briefly, what is Turbulence Aware? It's a repository of aircraft-generated real-time reports of the turbulence in the atmosphere coming off aircraft in flight. Those reports are used operationally by aircraft in our program to gain enhanced safety and also enhanced operational efficiency in terms of optimized fuel burn and reducing emissions as a result. We have about 1,500 aircraft in the program currently, and we generate around 30 million reports per year. Those reports constitute both smooth air reports and also turbulent reports. So just to provide a little bit more information, turbulence is historically a problem for any airline or pilot when we're flying. The atmosphere is very dynamic, and it does contribute to the cause of injuries to passengers and cabin crew. And of course, there is a significant economic impact. Airbus conducted a study around 4 years ago, and they determined that it may cost industry towards $2 billion US a year from either injuries, in-flight diversions, suboptimal fuel burn, damage to aircraft, and brand damage, etc. Next slide, please. So historically, as a pilot, in sort of my 35-year career, I dealt with paper products or what we call the subjective forecasts that are normally generated many hours before we go flying and cover large geographical areas and are really imprecise, normally in the location and severity of turbulence. We also deal a lot with what we call pilot reports. Those are reports we make from the aircraft in flight. If I'm at 36,000 feet, I might tell air traffic control, hey, I'm experiencing moderate turbulence if I'm in an A380 as an example. But, that doesn't really mean much to other aircraft in the vicinity of me, especially if they're a smaller aircraft. That may be severe for them, but they might be 200 nautical miles away from me. So once again, we don't have that real precision in the location. And at the moment, weather radar is unable to detect clear air turbulence. Next slide, please. So what we're seeing at the moment is airlines are looking for a bit more. Alex Cruz, the former CEO of British Airways, said, look, let's use data to manage risk. And so now we're starting to see this paradigm shift that we're able to use technology that's on board the aircraft to generate this objective data and make it available for consumption and operational use. So we are starting to see the small shift. It doesn't mean the old traditional tools will disappear. They will also continue to obviously be used. Next slide, please. So when we talk about an objective data point, we have to talk about the intensity metric that goes with it. Historically, as I said, turbulence, as a pilot, we talk about light, moderate, or severe, or anything in between, light to moderate or moderate to severe. So now with the objective data point, we come up with this intensity metric called eddy dissipation rate. It is the ICAO official metric. And the easiest way to understand it is what we're measuring now is the state of the atmosphere or the sea state. And the easiest analogy is to compare two ships of different sizes in the ocean. If I look over the edge of that big ship, I'm going to measure about a 1 to 2 meter high wave. And it will be exactly the same for the small boat. The wave height won't change. How that wave height impacts each boat will be different. And it's exactly the same for the aircraft in the sky. If you have an Airbus A380 beside a Boeing 737, they're both technically going to measure the same atmospheric state. So it's an absolute value, normally between 0 and 1. What's important is to understand how that wave height affects the particular aircraft type you're flying. So 0.24 as an example might be moderate turbulence for an Airbus A320, but it would be light turbulence for a Boeing 777. Next slide, please. Very soon we'll run this animation, but first just to provide some context, the algorithm that's running on the aircraft exists within the aircraft avionics bus. The algorithm has come from the NCAR, the National Center of Atmospheric Research in Boulder, Colorado. It's free, it's an open source algorithm, and as I said, it exists in the aircraft's avionics bus where it has access to the aircraft's measured parameters such as true airspeed and angle of attack. It's run through the algorithm at 8 times a second or 8 hertz, and it's a threshold-based algorithm. So the algorithm is continuously running. When a threshold is crossed, it compiles a report and then transmits it to the ground. The beauty of the system is if there's no turbulence, it periodically will also send out a heartbeat or what we call a routine report. And this comes every 20 to 30 minutes, depending on user customization. And what it does is it provides us an area where there's obviously smooth air in the atmosphere. So also operationally very useful. Calliope, could you please just run the animation? It will sort of show in a bit more clarity what's happening. So we had a bump. The algorithm is running the true airspeed, angle of attack, a couple of those parameters running into the algorithm on the bus, compiling a report. Okay, it comes up with a value, EDR, wave height, 0.34, and then puts it into sort of a text message, the ACARS system as we call it, and transmits that report down to the ground, where it ends up in the IATA turbulence aware server. So all this is happening really in real time. Okay, next slide, please. So what we end up with is this report, this data point that's being generated. And what you're looking at here is a screenshot of the IATA turbulence aware tool where these reports can be visualized. I think that the important point here is that now we have this precise location, precise altitude, and precise intensity. If I could give you another analogy, it would be like running the Waze navigation app in your car, and it's telling you that, hey, there's a pothole ahead on the road. Well, this is very similar. There's potholes ahead in the sky. Next slide, please. So effectively, what we've built, as I said earlier in the introduction, is a repository. We collect these real-time reports. We process them. What do? We normalize it, we quality control it, we completely de-identify it, and we make it available for operational consumption within a third of a second or 0.3 of a second. And then the airlines will hit the API and take that data point and ingest it into any operational tool they're using. And that tool is potentially already running on the flight deck. It doesn't have to be the IATA Turbulence Aware tool. This is the beauty of the system. It's not proprietary. You have complete free operational use, however you wish to take those raw data points and operationalize them to your dispatchers and crew. So to give you an idea, that report is generated in an aircraft in flight. It's sent to the ground within a minute. It's processed through our system, 0.3 of a second, and then it's sent back potentially to another aircraft within another minute. So it's as close to real time as we get. We're looking at a process of 1.5 to maybe 2 minutes maximum. Next slide, please. So practically for me on the flight deck, what am I going to do with this data? Well, I'm just going to manage my flight a lot more efficiently, a lot more safely, either laterally or vertically. I can coordinate my meal service a lot better. If I'm seeing ahead of me on the same route that there's an aircraft, 5 to 7 minutes ahead that's starting to experience some light turbulence, I can stop the coffee service. I can put on the seatbelt sign. I can start to look at aircraft above this one that's ahead of me and say, hey, what's their ride? Every report is also giving wind and temperature. So I can put those values into my flight management computer, and I can really look to extract a much more optimum prediction from my aircraft computer as to what level I should be flying at. That might say, hey, it's okay now to climb another 2,000 feet. I can climb 2,000 feet. I can save fuel, reduce emissions. I can still be completely safe and continue my coffee service to the passengers. So in that regard, it can be used operationally to much benefit. Okay, in the next slide, it's going to be a quick demonstration of the tool.
Okay, let's have a look at the IATA Turbulence Aware Viewer. So what you're looking at here is the live reports coming off those aircraft that are running the algorithm in flight. These reports on the screen could be anywhere from 1 minute old to 4 hours old, and they're available in a longer term store. The reports are color coded for intensity. The scale obviously in the top right hand corner, with the grey reports, the smooth air reports, or the heartbeat or routine reports as we call them, and then getting more into sort of the green, we start to get into sort of some of the light to moderate type turbulence. What I've done here is I've selected a report. If we zoom in here, we can see this report I've selected, and we get the detailed information about that report on the left-hand side. We can see this one is 6 minutes old at an altitude of around 33,000 feet, and the severity for operating a medium-weight aircraft like an Airbus A320 or a Boeing 737, as an example, would be nil turbulence. And it shows the values of the EDR, the eddy dissipation rate. And very importantly for us, when we're airborne, to put into our flight computer is the wind and temperature values. That'll help provide us with a much more accurate optimum altitude that we should be flying our aircraft at to really enhance our fuel burn, our fuel efficiency, and reduce those CO2 emissions that we talked about. One of the great practicalities of this tool is being able to insert your flight planned route. And today I just have a flight plan here from San Antonio up to Chicago Midway. And I'll submit that to the system, and you now see that this magenta line has been drawn, which is the flight plan as my dispatch has filed for me today. So this is what I'm going to be flying. And what I'm really interested in is first of all, a high level, having a look at the data. I can see there's a lot of grey reports through the centre, from the south to the northern part of the United States today. So I'm expecting a pretty smooth ride for my flight. You can see if I was further to the east or west, then there's a little bit of sort of light to moderate chop going on in those locations. What I can do though, if I'm running this tool on the flight deck with my Wi-Fi capability, I buffer my reports around my flight plan route. Obviously, I'm very interested in sort of, improving my mental picture all the time. So here I can really focus in on my flight today. And I can start to, if I want, I can change the altitude, maybe something from 30,000 feet and above, and maybe I'm interested in, say, the last 2 hours of turbulence data. And of course, while I'm airborne, new reports will be populating in front of me as aircraft fly near my track. What I've done for awareness is I've chosen a flight which was sort of in my vicinity. It's opposite direction. But I can have a good look at the wind and turbulence reports that are going on at a very similar altitude to me. This aircraft at 39,000 feet, maybe I was, or 38,000 feet, maybe I'm flying at 37 or 39, but it gives me a good idea of what's going on around me. And obviously, if I'm flying opposite direction at the same level, I can see that if I was following this aircraft in trail, I'd have a pretty smooth ride and would be safe for my cabin crew and passengers to run a good service. So that's just a very quick overview of how the tool can be used practically from a pilot perspective.
Great, thank you. So obviously we need airlines in the program to generate the data that we need globally to run this tool. So if we can move to the next slide, please. It would now be my pleasure to announce that Qatar Airways is our most recent member to join the operational program. Qatar has an extensive global network, and currently they've equipped over 120 of their aircraft. And really, with that network reach, it really helps us expand our global data set. Ultimately, we would love to have global coverage. Obviously, the more data we can generate, the more operational benefit and safety that airlines can derive. Next slide, please. Just to finish up, obviously this is a significant risk mitigation tool. There are other tangible benefits associated with it. We've talked about safety, obviously, and fuel, but, other items too, such as reducing the engineering inspections on aircraft, or maybe being able to, reduce your insurance premium, given that it is, as I said, risk mitigation. That's my presentation. I'll be happy now to take any questions. Thank you very much.
Great. Thanks very much, Brent. Again, if you do have questions, please enter them in the chat function, and we'll respond to them. And as we wait for questions, Brent, I just have to ask, you mentioned how many years you were a pilot. How would you have liked to have had this system, Turbulence Aware, this tool, when you were flying?
Yeah, good question, Perry. I think the obvious answer is, yeah, I would have loved it, as would have all of my colleagues as well. I think I mentioned the mental picture of pilots, and we talk about situational awareness. So we're always trying to update, or take information, gain information, and try to work out what we can do better or safer from the flight deck. And I'm sure during, my career that, I could have flown the aircraft, potentially more efficiently, had I had this information available to me. So, yeah, I would have loved to have had it. I mean, what's making it possible now is the advent of the connected flight deck and the capabilities with broadband, Wi-Fi, and the sort of products that are being developed by integrators that can be now displayed in real time with integrated weather phenomena. So, yeah, we have a bright future from safety and efficiency perspective.
Mm-hmm. Great. We've got a couple questions in. Here's one. How much does the Turbulence Aware tool rely on having in-flight Wi-Fi? And then if there's no coverage, and I guess that means if there's not there's no Wi-Fi coverage.
Good question.
Does it work?
Very good question. So the generation of the report itself in the animation I showed you is using a system called ACARS, Aircraft Communication Addressing and Reporting System. And it's effectively a text message system between the aircraft and the ground. That does not rely on Wi-Fi. So then the data is operationalized by the airline. How do they do that? Yes, if they have Wi-Fi and they're running a tool in the flight deck, they can then display those reports live back into the flight deck. If they're not running Wi-Fi, what some airlines are doing is having their dispatchers monitor the data, monitor the reports, and if they see that there's anything that's particularly going to affect any of their flights, wherever they happen to be in the world, they're simply going to send an ACARS message up to the crew. And I'll receive that in the flight deck, this kind of text message, and then I can act on it operationally. So, at the moment we have this, for want of a better word, a workaround. But the future is the fully connected flight deck and running that operational tool live. Yes.
Mm-hmm. And another question, you'd mentioned during your presentation that weather radar is unable to detect clear air turbulence. And the question is technology being developed to make it possible?
I don't know the precise answer to that at the moment. I would imagine so. As technology evolves, I would hope that we would eventually get to that. I think the weather radar is an interesting one because, obviously it shows us convection and clouds and the turbulence that's associated with it. I think the future also has been able to port to the ground in real-time radar images and also share them through an operational database. The same for icing and some of these other phenomena that we have to deal with on a day-to-day basis.
Great. A couple questions around the impact of climate change on clear air turbulence? In other words, do we see climate change worsening the phenomenon of clear air turbulence?
Yeah, that's a bit out of my scope of expertise. I would direct you, though, to Professor Paul Williams at the University of Reading in the UK. Professor Paul has done quite a lot of research in this area, and he's predicting, an increase in the an increase in the frequency, I should say, of severe turbulence in the coming decades. But I would definitely reach out to him for a more educated answer to that question.
Thank you. Question, could you go back and maybe summarize again how many aircraft are currently in the program?
Yep.
And then a questioner asks, is the number enough? So maybe that's more of a subjective question, right? It's never enough.
Yeah. So at the moment we have just over, I believe, 1,500 aircraft from a variety of airlines around the globe. There are many other airlines at the moment in the process of incorporating that reporting capability, hosting that small piece of software into the avionics bus. So over the coming years, we expect the number of aircraft to increase. And look, from my perspective, no, I could never have enough data. I mean, if you have too much data, then we start looking at aggregating it, running heat maps, and the professionals will be able to make it operationally useful in the best possible ways. So I think the aim is to get as much global coverage as possible and continue to extract those operational efficiencies and safety benefits.
Mm-hmm. Great. Well, I'm not really seeing. Here's a question again. I don't know if this is. I don't know that there's necessarily an objective answer to this, but are there regions of the world where clear air turbulence is more prevalent than in other regions of the world?
Look, I think if you look at where the jet streams predominantly can sit globally, and that across the North Atlantic, we have jet streams that move on a day-to-day basis, and normally they're associated with clear air turbulence. So yeah, anywhere you get a jet stream, to generalize, then yes. I'm not a meteorologist, but I am always aware of the jet stream and where it sits and crossing it. So that's always one heads up to me when I'm flying to be aware of.
Great. Well, I don't see any more questions in queue. So with that, it's only up to me to thank you again, Brent, for this presentation, and then hand it over to our next presenter, and that is my colleague, Chris Goder.